Hello, and welcome to Gloomy Realm. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that guide you beyond the familiar and into forgotten places hidden within the night, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, let your body become still, and allow the sounds of the outside world to gently fade into silence. Tonight, the path ahead disappears into the darkness, where forgotten tales are whispered, and every shadow has a story to tell. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself wander through the Gloomy Realm. Story 1, I bought the dash cam from a marketplace app for $18. That should have been my first warning. Nothing useful ever costs $18 unless someone wants to get rid of it fast. There was no real brand name on the box, no clear logo, no website. Just a few lines of writing I could not read and a barcode that would not scan when the seller tried to show me the listing details. He was standing in the parking lot of a grocery store with the box in one hand and a cigarette in the other, acting like he was doing me a favor by showing up at all. When the barcode failed, he shrugged, knocked $2 off the price, and said we were even. I should have walked away, but at the time, it felt like a small, harmless purchase. I worked the overnight shift at a distribution center off Route 9. My hours were bad, my sleep was worse, and most nights I drove home at the kind of hour when the roads looked abandoned by everyone except truckers and people with nowhere good to be. My mother hated that. She had started texting me articles about rear-end crashes on empty highways at 2 a.m., stories about tired drivers drifting over lines, drunk drivers blowing through intersections, and people found in ditches because no one had seen what happened. She did not say much directly, but the message was clear. She wanted me to be safer. Or at least, she wanted to feel like I was safer. So when I saw the cheap dash cam, I bought it. $18 seemed like a small enough price to stop my mother from sending me another article with a headline like "Local Man Killed on Empty Road After Night Shift." The camera was small and light, made of cheap black plastic that creaked when I pressed the buttons. It clipped to the windshield with a suction cup that never sat quite right. Every morning after my drive home, there was a round foggy mark on the glass where the cup had been, like the camera had breathed against the windshield all night. It recorded in loops, 15 minutes at a time. When the memory card filled up, it erased the oldest video and kept going. If I wanted to save anything, I had to pull the footage off before it got recorded over. I never did. There was nothing worth saving. For 3 weeks, every drive looked the same. I left my apartment in the dark, took the same exit, passed the same gas station with its bright white sign, and drove the same long stretch of road between home and the warehouse. At night, the road looked empty enough to be fake. Fields on both sides. A few distant houses. Power lines, the occasional pair of headlights far ahead or behind me. Most of the time, nothing happened. Most of the time, I was barely paying attention, just following muscle memory while the radio filled the car with voices. That was why I almost deleted Tuesday's footage without watching it. I had come home from work, tired and half awake, and I wanted to format the memory card before bed. I had built a little routine around it. Pop the card out, check the clips, delete them, put the card back in. It made me feel like I was taking care of something, even though I never really looked at the videos. That morning, my finger slipped. Instead of deleting the file, I opened it. The video started at mile marker 14. I knew that part of the road well. It was the flattest, emptiest section of my commute. Fields stretched out on both sides, dark and open, with no fences close to the road and almost no lights anywhere. I remembered driving through it only a few hours earlier. I remembered the radio being on, some call and show about high school football. I remembered checking my mirrors out of boredom because there was nothing else to look at. I remembered the road being empty. On the screen, a woman was standing on the shoulder. I stopped breathing for a moment. She was not walking. She was not waving her arms. She was not holding a phone, trying to flag someone down, or acting like a person whose car had broken down on an empty highway in the middle of the night. She simply stood there with her arms hanging loose at her sides. The headlights caught her for less than 2 seconds, but it was enough. She was pale. Not just pale like someone with light skin, pale in a flat, unnatural way, as if all the color had been washed out of her. She wore something thin and light-colored that hung straight down from her body. It did not move. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. At the speed I was driving, with air rushing past the car, anything loose should have shifted. A dress, a nightgown, even a long shirt should have fluttered. Hers did not. And she was facing the car, not facing the road like she was waiting for help, not looking down the highway like she expected another vehicle. She was facing my car directly, as if she had been standing there in the dark, waiting for my headlights to find her. I rewound the video 11 times. I counted. 11. Each time, I froze the frame where she was clearest. Each time I stared at the shape of her body, the hang of her arms, the pale blur of her face. And each time, my own memory argued with what I was seeing. That road was empty. I had driven that road. I would have seen her. After a while, I forced myself to stop. I told myself it was the camera. Cheap cameras do strange things in low light. Bad sensors smear road signs. Headlight glare turns fence posts into people. Compression makes shadows look like bodies. $18 dash cams do not show the truth. They show broken pieces of light and guess the rest. That was what I told myself. The next night, I drove the same route again. I watched the shoulder the entire time. My hands were sweaty on the wheel, and I drove slower than usual, almost 11 miles under the speed limit, just so my eyes had more time to check everything. The radio was off. The car felt too quiet. Every sign, every patch of dead grass, every bent reflector post made my heart jump. Mile marker 14 came into view. Then it passed. There was nothing there. No woman. No pale shape. No person standing still in the dark. Just dry grass, a cracked strip of shoulder, and a crushed beer can that flashed silver in my headlights. I laughed at myself when I got home. Not a real laugh, but close enough. The kind of laugh you make when you are trying to prove to an empty room that you are not scared. I took the memory card out of the camera and opened the footage anyway. She was there again. Same road, same shoulder, same still body, same pale clothes, same face turned toward the car. But she was not at mile marker 14 anymore. She was at mile marker 11. 3 miles closer to my apartment. I did not sleep much after that. I tried. I lay in bed with the lights off, listening to the refrigerator hum and the pipes settle in the walls, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing beside the road. I saw the way she faced the camera. I saw the way her clothes did not move. By morning, I had made a plan, or at least something that felt like a plan. I would keep recording. I would check each clip. I would see if there was a pattern. Fear feels less powerful when you turn it into numbers. That is what I told myself. If I could measure it, maybe I could understand it. If I could understand it, maybe it would stop being impossible. So, I started saving the clips. After each shift, I came home, took the card from the dash cam, and watched the footage at my kitchen table while the sun came up outside the blinds. I drank coffee that tasted like burned plastic and wrote notes in a cheap notebook. Date, time, road, mile marker, weather, anything I could think of. I still formatted the card after saving the clips. That became part of the ritual. Some desperate little superstition inside me believed that wiping the card might wipe her away too. It never did. For a few days, I watched the mile marker 11 clip over and over. I scrubbed back and forth across those few seconds until I knew every frame. There was no trick that I could find, no sign behind her, no road marker shaped like a shoulder, no post, no shadow at the right angle, just her, appearing in the footage where my memory insisted there had been nothing. Then I tried avoiding the route. I drove through town instead, adding 20 minutes to my commute. I passed brightly lit residential streets, gas stations, an all-night pharmacy with a buzzing sign, fast food places with empty drive-through lanes, and apartment buildings with blue television light flickering behind curtains. It cost more gas and took longer, but I did not care. I told myself that if I did not drive Route 9, the camera would have no place to show her. That morning, I got home feeling almost proud of myself. Then I checked the footage. The dashcam had recorded the town route like it should have. 15 minutes of normal streets. Streetlights, traffic signals, storefronts. A man walking a dog near a bus stop. My own turn signal blinking green against the windshield. But in the middle of the clip, for 4 seconds, the footage changed. It showed a different road. A dark 2-lane stretch with fields on both sides. No streetlights, no houses, no pharmacy sign. The kind of empty road I had not driven in days. Mile marker 8. She stood on the shoulder, facing the camera. The dashcam was no longer filming where my car was. It had stopped caring what road I actually drove on. That was when I tried to call the number in the manual. The manual was a thin, folded paper with bad English and tiny diagrams that looked copied too many times. The phone number was printed at the bottom. I called it 3 times. Each time, I got a deadline. Not voicemail, not a busy signal, just that flat, disconnected tone that makes you feel stupid for hoping. I searched the brand name stamped on the bottom of the dashcam. It was 3 letters with no vowels, the kind of fake brand name cheap electronics use to look official. Nothing came up. No product page, no reviews, no complaints. No one asking why their dashcam showed roads they had not driven. No one selling the same model. It was as if the thing had been made for exactly one person, passed through exactly one seller, and ended up on my windshield, because that was where it had always meant to be. Mile marker 5 appeared on a Thursday. I know it was Thursday, because by then I was keeping careful records. The notebook sat beside my plate at dinner, beside my coffee mug in the morning, and in my backpack at work. I wrote everything down like a scientist studying a storm that had learned my name. Mile marker 14, mile marker 11, mile marker 8, mile marker 5. 3 miles each time. Always closer to my apartment. Never faster, never slower. It was pacing itself. That thought made me feel sick. It was not rushing. It was not chasing me like something hungry and wild. It was patient. It knew where I lived. It knew it had time. On Tuesday night, sitting in the warehouse break room during my unpaid 15-minute break, I worked out the math. Marker 5 was 4.3 miles from my apartment. At the rate she was moving, she would reach my building in 9 days. The break room was bright and ugly. Vending machines hummed against the wall. A coworker's phone played music too loudly from 3 tables away. Someone laughed near the microwave. Everything around me was normal, and that made it worse. I sat there with my notebook open and felt the world tilt under me. When my break ended, I did not go back to work right away. I went out to the parking lot, opened my car, and peeled the dash cam off the windshield. The suction cup came loose with a wet pop. I almost dropped it. For a second, holding it in my hand, I expected it to feel warm, or cold, or alive. It felt like cheap plastic. I put it in the glove box, shut it inside, and told myself the problem was solved. It was not a good lie, but it was the only one I had. The drive home that night was unrecorded, or so I thought. It felt almost normal. Empty road. My headlights stretching ahead. Radio voices I did not really hear. I kept checking the shoulder anyway. I could not stop myself. Every dark patch looked like a person until I got close enough to prove it was only grass. When I got home, I sat in the car for several minutes before going inside. I thought about taking the dash cam from the glove box and throwing it into a dumpster. I thought about smashing it with a hammer. I thought about leaving it there forever and pretending I had never bought it. Instead, before bed, I checked it. I do not know why. Habit, maybe, fear, maybe. Some part of me needed to know whether removing it from the windshield had done anything. The dash cam had kept recording. The first part of the footage was dark. It showed the inside of the glove box, though there should not have been enough light to show anything. For most of the clip, there was only blackness, broken now and then by tiny shifts of gray. I watched it with a dry mouth, waiting. Near the end, the darkness changed. It opened into a hallway. My hallway. The one outside my apartment door. I knew it immediately. The stained carpet, the old baseboards, the flickering ceiling bulb my landlord kept promising to fix, the dent in the wall near the stairs where someone had moved furniture badly years ago. The camera was not inside my car anymore, not in any way that mattered. It was showing the hall outside my apartment. She stood at the far end, still pale, facing my door. My door. I checked the timestamp. The footage was from 11 minutes in the future. I watched it 3 times, though I do not know why. Maybe because I wanted the timestamp to change. Maybe because I wanted the hallway to become some other hallway. Maybe because I wanted to see her move and prove she was a person. She did not move. She only stood there, waiting. I am writing this now at my kitchen table. Every light in the apartment is on. The lamp in the living room, the stove light, the bathroom light, even the closet light. It does not help. Light only makes the shadows sharper. The dash cam is sealed inside a freezer bag in the sink. I put it there because I remembered hearing somewhere that cold can slow electronics down, or maybe slow batteries, or maybe slow things that are breaking. I do not know. It was a stupid thought, but fear makes stupid thoughts feel like plans. The camera is still on. I can see the little red recording light glowing through the plastic bag. I do not have a real theory anymore. I do not know what she wants. I do not know if she is a ghost, a warning, a recording, or something that found me through the camera and used the road because the road gave it a place to stand. Maybe it was never about distance. Maybe the mile markers were only a way for me to understand what was happening. A countdown my mind could read. The road was not where she lived. It was just the first place she had a reason to appear. Now, the distance is gone. The 11 minutes from the last clip are almost over. I have not looked through the peephole. I will not. I am sitting here with my phone in my hand, but I have not called anyone because I do not know what I would say. There is a woman outside my door who first appeared on footage from a road I drove every night. She has been moving closer in 3-mile steps. My dash cam recorded my hallway from the future. Please send help. No one would come in time. The bulb outside my apartment just flickered. I heard something in the hallway. Not footsteps exactly, more like a soft shift of weight, like someone who has been standing still for a very long time finally moved. I know she is on the other side of the door now, pale, patient, and facing me, just like she faced the car. And I think the dash cam in the sink just started recording again. Story 2. I grew up far out in the middle of nowhere, in a place where the roads were narrow, the houses were spread far apart, and the night sky felt bigger than anything a child could understand. Most of my childhood was spent exploring my grandfather's cattle ranch. It was 300 acres of creeks, ponds, pastures, woods, and quiet places that felt like they belonged only to me. At least, that was how I saw it when I was young. To me, the whole ranch was my kingdom, and every tree, hill, and bend in the creek was part of it. Our family home sat on Cypress Hill, the tallest hill in the whole county. From there, you could see for miles in every direction. I used to stand in the yard and watch the world below me like I was some kind of little lookout. I knew when John Feltz was feeding his cattle because all the tiny dark shapes in his pasture would begin moving in a neat, hurried line toward the feed troughs. I knew when Bob Jones was burning dead chickens, even though he was not supposed to, because the stink of burned feathers would drift across the fields and reach our porch. Sometimes, if the weather was clear enough, I could even see the Goodyear blimp moving across the sky on its way toward Dallas. Most of my early life was spent outside. I grew up among pine trees, tall grass, red dirt, and thorny plants that scratched my legs when I ran too fast through the brush. Down in the valley, cool spring water fed into a creek that twisted through the land. That creek was my favorite place in the world. The water was clear in some spots and muddy in others. It ran over smooth stones and around fallen branches before making its way to a dammed-up pond where I lost more fishing lures than I could ever count. On hot summer days, I would strip down and swim in the deeper pools where the water stayed cold even in July. I would float on my back and look up through the trees while the sunlight moved across the leaves. I knew where the snakes liked to sun themselves, where the frogs gathered after rain, and where the crawfish hid under rocks. I knew which patches of dirt would hold deer tracks and which trees were best for climbing. At night, I would sit in the yard and watch fireflies blink above the grass. Far off, coyotes would howl at the passing train, and I would listen until my mother finally opened the door and told me to come inside. By all accounts, it was a happy childhood. It was free, quiet, and full of places to disappear into, except for one night every year. On the evening of the summer solstice, before the sun fully set, my parents would call me and my sister inside. They never waited until dark. They were always careful about that. Once we were in the house, they would draw every curtain and lock every door. Then they would turn off most of the lights and set candles around the living room. By candlelight, we would play board games, tell stories, eat popcorn, and pretend it was some kind of family holiday. When I was little, I liked it. It felt special. My dad would make his voice deep and dramatic when he told stories. My mother would laugh and tell him not to scare us too much. My sister and I would play games until we got sleepy. It was one of the only nights of the year when no one talked about chores, school, or work. But there were two rules that were never treated like a game. Do not look outside. Do not go outside. Those rules were serious. My parents did not yell often, but on the solstice, they became strict in a way that made the air in the house feel tight. If I asked why, I always got the same answer. We'll tell you when you're older. Of course, that only made me more curious. I broke the rule a few times. I remember lying in bed for hours, waiting for the house to settle. I would listen until my parents stopped moving around downstairs. I would wait until my sister's breathing became slow and steady in the next room. Then I would slip out of bed, crawl to my window, and lift the curtain just enough to peek outside. Those nights were darker than any other nights on Cypress Hill. Normally, the countryside below us was dotted with lights. Security lights glowed near barns. Kitchen windows shone across the fields. Porch lights marked the roads. But on solstice nights, everything was dark. It was as if the whole county had decided to vanish. Everything was dark, except one light. If you followed the creek through the valley, way up toward the northern corner of my grandfather's land, and then looked past the property line into the thick woods beyond, you could see it. A huge bonfire. Every solstice night, flames rose above the tops of the tall loblolly pines. The fire was far away, but it was so large that I could see shadows moving around it. They danced in and out of the light, bending and swaying like the fire itself was pulling them. I would sit there by the window, barely breathing, watching that distant glow, until I became too tired to keep my eyes open. Then I would crawl back into bed and hide under the blankets, feeling like I had seen something I was never meant to see. School was difficult for me. I was not athletic. I was not especially good in class. I was not gifted at making friends. In a class of 254 kids, you might think a person would have plenty of options. But small towns do not work that way. Everyone already knows who you are before you get the chance to become anyone else. I had one friend, or at least that was what I called her. Her name was Emily. Looking back, I think she was mostly just kind to me. She talked to me when other people ignored me. She smiled when I made nervous jokes. She let me sit with her sometimes when there was nowhere else to sit. She was pretty in a way that made me feel awkward and young and stupid. Her green eyes reminded me of the deep, clear pools in the creek after spring rain. I tried many times to gather the courage to ask her on a date, but I never did. She always felt just out of reach, and I was always too scared to take the chance. Life went on that way until the summer before my senior year. That solstice began like all the others. My parents called us in before the sun set. The curtains were drawn, the candles were lit. We played Settlers of Catan by flickering light while the windows turned black around us. Dad told stories. Mom made supper. My sister complained about losing the game, even though she had won the year before and still bragged about it. Everything felt normal. But I was 18 by then, and 18 has a way of making a person feel braver than they really are. I told myself I was too old to be treated like a child. I told myself my parents were hiding some silly town tradition, and I had a right to know what it was. I had watched that distant fire for years. I had imagined all kinds of things about it. Maybe it was just a group of old families having a private celebration. Maybe it was a bonfire party. Maybe everyone was afraid of nothing. Around 11:30, curiosity finally won. I waited until the house was quiet. Then I opened my bedroom window and climbed out into the humid June night. The moment my feet touched the ground outside, I felt like I had done something unforgivable. The air was warm and heavy. The grass was damp under my feet. The house stood behind me, dark and silent, with every curtain shut tight. I looked back once, almost hoping my dad would be standing at the window, ready to stop me. No one was there. I swallowed the fear rising in my throat and ran down toward the tree cover near the creek. I wish I had gone back inside. I wish I had stayed ignorant. The creek welcomed me like family. Even in the dark, I knew the way. I knew which rocks were loose, which roots rose through the dirt, and where the bank dropped sharply into the water. The sound of the creek moving over stone followed me as I headed north. Crickets sang in the brush. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once and then went silent. My steps were quick and light over the pine needles. Every now and then, I stopped to listen for wild pigs. They were mean, dangerous animals, and running into a group of them at night was one of the few things that could scare me even then. Thankfully, I never heard any. The farther I walked, the stranger the night felt. There were no house lights anywhere, no barking dogs, no engines on distant roads. Even the usual sounds of the countryside seemed softer than they should have been. It felt like every living thing was holding still, waiting. After about an hour, I reached the northern edge of my grandfather's land. I knew because of the old fence line and the leaning post with a rusted wire twisted around it. Beyond that was another property, heavily wooded and rarely visited. I had never crossed into it before. That night, I stepped over the line. Almost immediately, I heard singing. Women's voices drifted through the trees. The sound was soft at first, carried by the wind, but it grew clearer as I moved forward. The song had no words I understood. It rose and fell in strange patterns, sometimes beautiful, sometimes sharp enough to make my skin prickle. I crouched low and crept through the brush. Then I saw the clearing. In the center of it burned the largest fire I had ever seen. Flames climbed high into the dark, throwing orange light across the trunks of the pines. Sparks rose into the sky like a swarm of glowing insects. The heat reached me even from the trees. Before the fire was a large, flat stone. Candles burned on and around it. Smoke curled upward from bowls of incense, mixing with the smell of ash, pine sap, and something musky that I did not recognize. Figures moved around the fire in a circle. There were 9 of them. They danced with slow, strange movements, bending their bodies forward and back, turning their arms toward the flames, then toward the sky. Their hair clung to their faces and shoulders from sweat. Their skin shone in the firelight, yellow and orange and red. They wore garlands on their heads, made from leaves, flowers, and thin twisting branches. Some were wrapped in loose pale cloth, others covered only enough to make the scene feel more ceremonial than ordinary. At first, I thought they were strangers. Then, I recognized one. Ms. Carter, my middle school art teacher, was there near the front of the circle. Her face looked younger and wilder in the firelight. Mrs. Fairbanks, the sheriff's wife, was beside her, swaying with her eyes half closed. Catherine Phelps, who had graduated from high school 3 years before, moved near the edge of the group. Her hands lifted as if she were reaching for something only she could see. My stomach turned cold. These were not strangers from some faraway place. These were women from town. Women I had seen at the grocery store, at school events, in church, at county fairs. Women who smiled in daylight and waved from their cars. I should have run then. Instead, I stayed behind a fallen pine tree and watched. The singing stopped all at once. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then a playful tune began to drift through the clearing. It sounded like a flute. The women gasped and lifted their hands. "Master," they called softly. "Master." The word moved around the circle like a prayer. I pressed myself lower behind the fallen tree, but curiosity pulled my eyes back to the clearing. In the middle of the women, something rose from the smoke and firelight. At first, I thought it was a man. He was tall, taller than anyone I had ever seen. His chest and arms were lean and strong, and his face was handsome in a way that made him hard to look away from. But the longer I stared, the more wrong he became. His legs were covered in coarse, dark hair. They bent strangely. not quite like human legs. His eyes were wide and flat and terrible, like the eyes of a goat. From the top of his head rose two large horns, curved and heavy like those of a ram. His hands held a flute to his lips. The music that came from it was beautiful. That was the worst part. It was not harsh or frightening. It was sweet. It slipped through the trees and into my head. It made me feel warm and dizzy. It made the fire seem brighter and the shadows softer. For a few seconds, I forgot to be afraid. The women gathered around him, moving as if they were caught in a dream. Their hands reached toward him. Their faces were full of worship. The air filled with a thick animal smell that mixed with the incense until I felt sick and lightheaded at the same time. Then the dancing began again. The women moved faster now, circling him, singing in voices that rose above the flames. The creature played his flute, and the music seemed to give orders that only they could understand. Despite my fear, I felt myself being pulled toward the clearing. My mind became foggy. My body trembled. Some part of me wanted to stand, to step out from behind the tree, to walk into the firelight and join them. I did not understand the feeling, and that made it even more terrifying. It did not feel like my own thought. It felt planted inside me. I began to rise without meaning to. The music stopped. So did the dancing. Every face turned toward the forest. I froze. For one terrible second, I thought they had seen me. Then I realized they were not looking at my hiding place. They were looking past me, toward the deeper woods. I turned my head. A figure was moving through the trees. She wore a thin white veil that covered her from head to foot. She walked slowly, carefully, almost like she was part of a procession. The women began to hum, low and steady. The creature lowered his flute and watched her come. When she stepped into the clearing, the veil was removed. The firelight touched her face. I knew her. Emily. My Emily. Her green eyes shone in the glow of the fire, brighter than I had ever seen them. Her face was calm, but not peaceful. She looked like someone walking in a dream, or someone trying very hard not to wake up. She wore a simple white ceremonial covering, thin and loose, with flowers woven into her hair. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. A moment before, I had been afraid for myself. Now I was afraid for her. I wanted to call her name. I wanted to run into the clearing and pull her away. But my body would not move. My throat closed tight, and no sound came out. The women began to sing again. This time, the song was more beautiful and more terrible than before. The notes rose together in perfect harmony, then broke apart into sounds that hurt my ears. The creature reached out and took Emily's hand. He led her toward the flat stone in front of the fire. The women circled them, dancing faster, their shadows twisting across the trees. Emily climbed onto the stone. She lay down slowly, like an offering placed before an altar. The creature bent over her. The fire roared higher. I could not watch anymore. Something inside me broke. I turned and ran. Branches slapped my face and arms as I pushed through the brush. I stumbled over roots and nearly fell into the creek. Behind me, the singing grew louder. The flute began again, high and sweet and mocking. I heard women crying out in worship, heard the creature's heavy breathing, heard the fire snapping like it was alive. I ran faster. The sounds followed me through the woods. They seemed to chase me along the creek, echoing between the trees long after I should have been too far away to hear them. I did not stop until my lungs burned and my legs shook. By the time I reached Cypress Hill, the house was still dark. The curtains were still drawn. No one had noticed I was gone. I climbed back through my bedroom window, shut it behind me, and crawled into bed with my clothes still damp from sweat and creek water. I did not sleep. The next morning, my parents acted like nothing had happened. My mother made breakfast. My father asked if I had slept well. My sister complained about being bored the night before. I looked at them and wondered what they knew. I wondered if they had always known. I never returned to school after that. I told my parents I was sick at first. Then I said I wanted to finish somewhere else. Not long after, I left town entirely. I could not sit in a classroom and look at Emily's empty desk. I could not go to the store and see Miss Carter buying paint supplies, or Mrs. Fairbanks smiling beside the sheriff. I could not stand on Cypress Hill anymore and look toward the northern woods. Because now I understood. Everyone knew something happened in that clearing. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not every name. But they knew enough to close their curtains. They knew enough to keep their children inside. They knew enough to never ask questions out loud. Once a year, on the summer solstice, the whole countryside went dark for a reason. And somewhere beyond my grandfather's land, in a clearing hidden among the pines, women from our town gathered around a fire and offered themselves to something older than any church, older than any law, older than any fear I had ever known. They called him Master. But I know his name now. Pan, Story 3. My dad used to run sometimes, not for exercise, not because he was late for work, not because someone was chasing him, and not because he was scared. He would just suddenly take off running for no clear reason at all. It did not happen every day, or even every week, so we could never fully get used to it. But it happened often enough that, after a while, nobody in my family acted surprised anymore. The first time I remember seeing it, I was 7 years old. It was after dinner on a normal weeknight. Nothing strange had happened that day. Mom had made chicken, rice, and green beans, and Dad had told me to finish everything on my plate before I could watch TV. After we ate, he stood at the sink washing dishes, while my mom sat at the small kitchen table with a book in her hands. I was on the floor with a few plastic action figures, making them fight under the chairs. The house was quiet in that warm, ordinary way houses get after dinner. The faucet was running. Plates clicked softly in the sink. My mom turned a page. I remember the yellow light above the kitchen table and the smell of dish soap. Then Dad stopped moving. He had one hand inside a glass, the other holding a sponge. Water kept running over his fingers, but he did not seem to notice. His shoulders went still. His head turned slightly toward the kitchen window, which looked out over the backyard. I looked up because even at 7, I could feel when the room changed. Dad stared out the window for a few seconds. Then he giggled. It was quiet, almost gentle. It was not a big laugh, and it did not sound evil or crazy. It sounded like a little kid trying not to laugh in class, like he had remembered a joke and did not want to say it out loud. Before I could ask what was funny, he dropped the sponge into the sink and ran. He did not walk quickly. He did not jog. He sprinted. He ran out of the kitchen, pushed open the back door, and disappeared into the yard. The door swung shut behind him. I sat there with one of my toys in my hand, waiting for my mom to react. I thought she would scream or run after him. I thought she would tell me to stay inside. Instead, she barely looked up from her book. "He'll be back," she said. That was all. I asked her where he was going. She turned another page and said, "I don't know." I remember staring at the back door for a long time. Outside, the yard was dark, except for the porch light. I imagined my dad running across the grass past the swing set, into the trees behind our fence. I imagined him running faster and faster until he became a shadow. About 20 minutes later, the back door opened. Dad came in breathing a little heavier than before. His hair was messy, and there was a smear of dirt on one of his shoes. He did not look scared. He did not look happy either. He walked back to the sink, picked up the sponge, and finished washing the dishes as if nothing had happened. Nobody asked him where he had gone. That was the first time I saw it, but it was not the last. As I got older, I learned the pattern. The giggle always came first. It did not matter where we were or what we were doing. Dad would stop, stare at something no one else could see, giggle softly to himself, and then run. Once, it happened at church. We were standing during a hymn, and Dad was beside my mom with a songbook open in his hands. His mouth was moving along with the words, even though he was not much of a singer. Then, he stopped. His eyes shifted toward the tall, stained glass windows near the side of the church. The sunlight coming through them painted red and blue patches across his face. Then came that small giggle. People near us glanced over. My mother closed her eyes for half a second like she had been waiting for it. Dad placed the songbook on the pew, stepped into the aisle, and ran straight out of the church. The heavy wooden doors slammed behind him. The hymn continued. My mom kept singing. I wanted to sink into the floor. He came back before the service ended. He slipped into the pew beside us, picked up the songbook, and joined in again. No one said anything, but I saw people looking. After church misses, Carter asked my mom if Dad was feeling all right. Mom smiled politely and said, "He's fine." Another time, it happened in the grocery store. Dad was pushing the cart while Mom compared prices on cereal. My sister and I were arguing over what snacks we wanted. Dad suddenly stopped in the middle of the aisle. He looked toward the frozen food section, though there was nothing there except bright freezer lights and a man choosing ice cream. The giggle came. My sister stopped talking immediately. Dad turned and ran down the aisle, past a woman with a basket, past the checkout lanes, and out through the automatic doors. The cart stayed where it was, one wheel crooked. A box of cereal tilted against the side. Mom sighed and moved the cart out of the way. A store employee asked if everything was okay. Mom said yes, he just does that. The employee laughed because he thought she was joking. She was not. Dad came back 15 minutes later, carrying nothing. His face was calm. He took the cart from my mom, asked if we needed milk, and kept shopping. That was what bothered me most. Not the running itself, though that was strange enough. It was the way he returned. There was no story, no explanation, no embarrassment, no fear. He never acted like something strange had happened. He would simply come back and continue exactly where he had stopped. If he had been washing dishes, he washed dishes. If he had been eating dinner, he sat back down and kept eating. If he had been reading the newspaper, he picked it up again. The only thing he ever said when someone asked why he ran was, "I don't know." He never said it like a joke. He never shrugged and laughed it off. He did not look ashamed or annoyed. He genuinely seemed to have no idea. At first, I thought he was lying. I thought there had to be a reason. Maybe he was playing some private game. Maybe he had a medical problem. Maybe he was meeting someone. As a kid, your mind turns everything into a story. I used to imagine he was a spy, or that he had a secret place hidden in the woods where he kept something important. But the older I got, the less fun it became. I began watching him more closely. The giggle was always the same. Soft, quick, almost sweet. But his face never matched it. That was the part that stayed with me. When people laugh, their faces change. Their eyes move. Their mouths lift. Even if they try not to smile, something gives them away. Not Dad. His face stayed blank. He would giggle, but his mouth would not smile. His eyes would not brighten. His expression stayed empty, like whatever was funny was not inside him. Like the sound had come from somewhere else and only used his throat to get out. When I was a teenager, I asked my mom about it. We were in the laundry room, folding clothes. Dad was outside mowing the lawn. I could hear the mower humming in the yard. "Why does Dad run?" I asked. Mom folded one of his shirts slowly. "You've asked that before. You never answer." She looked tired, not angry, just tired in a way I did not understand then. "He doesn't know," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one we have." I asked if he had seen a doctor. She said yes. I asked what the doctor said. She said nothing useful. I asked if she was scared. She did not answer right away. She folded another shirt, then another. "Finally," she said, "I was, at first. And now?" She looked toward the small window above the washer. Outside, Dad pushed the mower across the grass in straight, careful lines. Now I'm just used to it. That answer bothered me more than fear would have. Eventually, that was how it became in our family. Dad runs sometimes. That was just a fact. Like the garage door sticking in winter, or the upstairs bathroom sink dripping if you did not turn the handle hard enough. It was strange, but it belonged to us. We stopped talking about it because talking never changed anything. Years passed. My sister moved out first. Then I did. Dad kept running sometimes. Mom would mention it in phone calls like she was talking about the weather. "Your father ran during dinner last night. Did he come back?" "Of course." "How long?" 10 minutes. That was all. Then Dad died. It was a heart attack. Quick, the doctor said. Peaceful, he had been sitting in his recliner watching TV when it happened. Mom found him there with the remote still in his hand. His face was calm. His shoes were neatly placed on the floor. Nothing looked dramatic or terrible. He was just gone. The funeral was small. Friends came, neighbors came, some people from church came. A few of them told stories about him. They talked about how helpful he had been, how he fixed things, how he never complained, how he always showed up when someone needed him. Nobody mentioned the running. I thought someone might. I almost wanted someone to. I wanted proof that it had been real, that I had not grown up inside some quiet family madness where everyone agreed to ignore the same impossible thing. But nobody said a word. A few months after the funeral, I went to help Mom clean out the attic. The attic had always been full of old things. Boxes of Christmas decorations. Bags of clothes nobody wore anymore. School projects. Broken lamps. Photo albums. My dad had never thrown much away. He was the kind of man who kept screws in jars and old instruction manuals for appliances we had not owned in 20 years. Near the back, under a dusty blanket, I found a cardboard box full of old camcorder tapes. Seeing them made me feel something I was not ready for. My dad used to film everything when we were kids. Birthdays, school plays, Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, my sister learning to ride a bike, me losing a tooth. The tapes had been part of our house for so long that I had stopped thinking about them. I took the box home. I told myself I was going to digitize them before they got too old and ruined. That was true, but it was not the only reason. I wanted to see him again, not in photos, but moving. Talking alive for several nights, I watched the tapes. Most of them were exactly what I expected. Grainy family moments, bad lighting. My mom telling Dad to stop filming her hair. My sister crying because I blew out her birthday candle. Dad behind the camera, laughing softly at things we did as children. Then I found one tape I remembered clearly. It showed Dad repairing our mailbox. I had seen it dozens of times growing up. Mom had filmed from the porch while Dad stood near the road with a toolbox at his feet. The mailbox had been leaning badly for weeks, and Dad finally decided to fix it. In the video, he kneels in the grass, tightens something, stands up, wipes his hands on his jeans, and looks pleased with himself. Then, if I remembered right, he giggles and runs across the street. I knew the moment was coming before it happened. On the screen, Dad stood near the mailbox. The day was bright. Cars passed every now and then. Mom's voice came from behind the camera, teasing him about taking too long. Dad looked toward the trees across the street. He giggled. Then, he ran. Just like always. He crossed the street fast and disappeared out of frame. When I was young, this part of the tape used to make my sister and me laugh. We thought it was strange, but funny in the way children find family oddities funny. Mom had never laughed when we watched it. She would always get quiet until Dad came back into the frame. This time, something made me pause the video. I do not know why. Maybe because he was dead now. Maybe because I wanted to understand. Maybe because grief makes you search for meanings in places where there may not be any. I rewound the tape and played that part again. Dad stood by the mailbox. He looked toward the trees. He giggled. He ran. I paused as he passed the camera. Then I moved the video forward frame by frame. In one frame, his body was blurred from motion. In the next, his head had turned slightly toward the lens. I frowned. I did not remember that. I moved one more frame forward. My stomach went cold. Dad was smiling. Not a huge grin, not some wild, open-mouthed expression. It was small, almost hidden. Just the slightest smile at the corner of his mouth, like he was trying not to laugh again. I sat there staring at the screen. That was wrong. I had watched that tape my whole life. I knew every second of it. Dad had never turned toward the camera. He had never smiled. That was one of the things that always frightened me about the running. The giggle came, but his face stayed blank. I told myself I must have missed it. Maybe old tapes look different when digitized. Maybe the frame had always been there, and I had never noticed because I was a kid. But that did not feel true. I watched it again, and again. Each time, there it was. Dad turning toward the camera. Dad smiling. After a while, I called my sister. I did not tell her what I had seen. I only said I had digitized one of the old tapes and wanted her to watch a clip. I sent it to her and waited. A few minutes later, my phone rang. I answered, but before I could ask what she thought, she said, "Did he always smile?" I did not speak. She breathed into the phone, shaky and uneven. "I don't remember him smiling," she said. "Do you?" "No," I said. There was silence between us. Then she said, "I don't like this." Neither did I. After we hung up, I closed the laptop and sat in my bedroom with the lights off. I do not know why I turned them off. Maybe the screen had been too bright. Maybe I wanted the room to feel quieter. Outside, the house was still. My wife was away for work, so I was alone. The hallway beyond my bedroom door was dark. I kept thinking about my father's smile. It was such a small thing, a tiny change in one frame of an old tape, but it felt impossible. It felt like the past had moved when no one was looking. I tried to tell myself there was a simple reason. Memory is not perfect. Old videos can surprise you. People forget details. But I had not forgotten that. My dad had never smiled when he ran. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. Fast footsteps. Someone was sprinting down the hallway. My whole body went stiff. The sound started far away, near the other end of the house. Heavy feet hitting the floor, moving fast. Not walking, not jogging, running, coming closer. The hallway shook with each step. I could not breathe. I stared at the closed bedroom door, waiting for it to burst open. The footsteps came closer and closer, faster than any normal person should be able to run inside a house. Then they stopped, right outside my bedroom door. I sat frozen on the bed. The doorknob did not turn. Nothing moved. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from the other side of the door, I heard a soft little giggle. Story 4. Yes, this is a horror story. Here is the rewritten version, in simple English, smooth flow, no headings, no bold names, and kept close to the original events. During my junior year of high school, my life felt almost perfect. I had a girlfriend who loved me, a big group of friends, a place as the starting left guard on my school's football team, and an older brother who meant more to me than I think I ever told him. I was not rich or famous or anything like that, but I had a good life. I had people around me. I had a future that seemed simple and bright. I thought things would keep going that way for a long time. Then I turned 18, and almost everything fell apart. My older brother died in a workplace accident not long after my birthday. He had been unloading his dump truck when another truck turned too close and crushed the cab he was sitting in. I was told it happened fast. People always say that when they do not know what else to say. They say he probably did not suffer. They say he would not have known what hit him. They say things like that because they think it helps, but it does not. It just gives your mind new pictures to torture you with. My brother was one of the most important people in my life. He was the kind of older brother who picked on me, but would have fought anyone else who tried. He taught me how to throw a football, how to fix a flat tire, how to handle a rifle safely, and how to keep my mouth shut when it was better to listen. He was loud, funny, stubborn, and always acted like he knew everything. Most of the time he did. After he died, I changed. I did not mean to. I just became quiet. I stopped going out. I stopped answering messages. I stopped caring about school, football, and almost everything else. At first, people said they understood. They told me to take my time. They told me they were there for me. But grief makes people uncomfortable when it does not go away fast enough. After a while, most of my friends stopped reaching out. My girlfriend left too. I do not blame her completely. I was not easy to be around. But at the time, it felt like one more person walking away from me when I already felt like the ground had opened under my feet. Only 2 friends stayed. Brent and Easton. I will always be grateful for that. They did not try to fix me. They did not give speeches. They just kept showing up. Sometimes that was the only thing that kept me from disappearing into myself completely. But the thing that hurt the most was not losing my friends. It was not even my girlfriend leaving. The thing that broke me in a way I still cannot explain was my mom looking at me one morning and calling me by my brother's name. My brother and I had always looked alike. People had said it our whole lives. Same face shape, same eyes, same hair, same way of standing. The only real difference was that I was almost 6 inches taller than him. After he died, I guess seeing me around the house must have hurt my mom too. Maybe for 1 second, she forgot. Maybe her mind reached for him before it reached for me. But when she said his name while looking at me, something inside me snapped. I did not yell at her. I did not say anything. I just walked away. Later that night, I drank until I could not think straight. After that, drinking and getting high became the main way I handled things. I know that is not healthy. I knew it even then. But it made everything quieter. It softened the sharp edges of the memories. It made the pain feel far away for a little while. The only good thing that happened during that time was Frost. Brent gave him to me. He was an Irish wolfhound puppy, big-pawed and clumsy, with a coat so white he almost looked unreal. He was the only puppy in his litter that survived being born. Brent said maybe that meant he was meant for me. I did not believe in signs back then, but I took the puppy anyway. I named him Frost because of his white fur, and because he had this calm, cold-eyed look even when he was little. Frost became my shadow. He followed me everywhere. When I sat outside, he sat beside me. When I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he climbed up and pressed his heavy body against my side. He did not ask questions. He did not tell me to move on. He just stayed. In some ways, that dog understood grief better than most people did. Almost every weekend, I would take Frost, Brent, and Easton out to my family farm. Calling it a farm makes it sound more alive than it was. It had been in my family since pioneers first came into Kentucky, passed down through generations until it became less of a working farm and more of a piece of history that nobody knew what to do with. No one lived close to it anymore. We did not keep animals there. We did not grow crops. The land was too much to maintain. Almost 600 acres of fields, woods, old fences, dirt roads, and crumbling houses that had been empty longer than I had been alive. Over time, the main house had turned into a hunting lodge for my family. It was where my dad, uncles, and cousins went during deer season. It had old furniture, a wood stove, a few bedrooms upstairs, a freezer, a gun cabinet, and enough dust in the corners to make the place feel older than it probably was. For me and my friends, it became something else. It became a safe place, a place where we could drink, watch movies, talk about life, or not talk at all. It was far away from school, parents, memories, and everything waiting back home. At least, that is what it used to be. Last weekend, something changed. The three of us drove out to the lodge like we had done many times before. Frost rode in the back seat with his head between the front seats, breathing hot air on my arm the whole way. By the time we got there, the sun was already going down behind the trees. The fields were muddy from rain earlier in the week, and the woods around the property looked black and thick in the fading light. We brought in our bags, some drinks, snacks, and enough bad decisions to last the night. We lit the stove, turned on the TV, and settled into the living room. Frost stretched out near the door, his long legs reaching across the floor like he owned the place. For the first few hours, everything was normal. We drank, laughed, and watched Netflix. At some point, we started arguing about whether college was really anything like the show Blue Mountain State. Brent thought it had to be at least a little like that. Easton said real college was probably just debt, exams, and people pretending to have their lives together. I mostly sat there laughing because I was drunk enough to find the argument funny. Then Brent suddenly sat straight up. It was not a slow movement. He shot up like someone had yanked a wire attached to his back. His face changed. 1 second he was laughing, and the next he was staring toward the front of the cabin with wide eyes. I looked at him and said, "You good, man? You gonna throw up?" He did not answer. Instead, he stood up fast and turned off the TV. Then he moved around the living room, switching off anything that made noise. The small fan near the kitchen. The speaker. Even the old mini fridge in the corner, which had been making a low buzzing sound. Easton got up and grabbed his arm. "Dude, what is your problem? What are you doing?" Brent put a finger to his lips and shushed us. His face had gone pale. "Did you hear that?" He whispered. Easton and I went quiet. At first, I heard nothing but the fire shifting in the stove and the wind outside. Then Brent said, his voice shaking, "I swear there's something outside the cabin." We listened for a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. It felt longer because nobody moved. Frost had lifted his head from the floor, but he was not barking yet. His ears were up, and he was staring at the front door. I tried to calm Brent down. I told him it was probably a branch, maybe a deer, maybe one of the old boards on the porch settling in the cold. Out there, in the middle of that much land, sounds did strange things at night. The woods could make a squirrel sound like a man walking if your nerves were bad enough. Then we heard the owl hoots. 4 of them. The first one sounded close enough to be real. The second was a little higher. The third was higher still, stretched in a way that made my skin tighten. The fourth did not sound like an owl at all. It was too sharp, too forced, almost like a person trying to copy an owl but not knowing when to stop. All 3 of us froze. My family has signals for different things when we hunt or move through the land. They are all made with bird calls because they do not stand out much in the woods. A quail whistle means I shot an animal. 3 crow calls mean I'm over here. 4 owl hoots mean predator, bring a gun. I had heard those signals my whole life. My brother used them. My dad used them. My uncles used them. They were familiar to me, almost comforting, because they belonged to my family. But hearing 4 owl hoots at 2 in the morning outside that lodge, from something we could not see, felt wrong in a way I cannot fully explain. Someone was out there. Or something was pretending to be someone. I stood up, though my legs did not feel steady. I could not stand the thought of ignoring it. I had already lost one person I loved. I was not going to sit inside while someone might be hurt outside calling for help. If it was my dad or one of my uncles or even some stranger lost on our land, I had to check. I moved toward the door. Before I even touched the handle, Frost went wild. He jumped up so fast his claws scratched the floor. His whole body became stiff, and a deep growl came from his chest. I had never heard him make that sound before. This was not normal barking. This was warning. Real warning. His lips pulled back, showing his teeth, and he stared at the door like he could see through it. The next second, something hit the door from the other side. Not knocked. Hit. The whole door shook in its frame. Easton cursed and stumbled backward. Brent made a sound like he was trying to breathe, but could not get air. Frost lunged forward, barking so hard it hurt my ears. Then we heard something running off the porch. Only it did not sound like one thing. At first, it was heavy steps, fast and uneven, like a person running. Then, without slowing down, the sound changed. The rhythm dropped lower, faster, more spread out, like whatever it was had gone from 2 legs to 4 in the space of a single breath. Then another set of steps followed it. 2 things. There had been 2 things on the porch. For a few seconds, nobody spoke clearly. It was just a mess of panic. Easton kept saying, "What was that? What was that?" Brent was gasping and bumping into furniture, trying to back away from the door. He kept repeating, "I heard it. I told you I heard it. It was in the woods. How did it get to the porch? How did it get there without us hearing it?" I did not have an answer. I did not want an answer. We ran upstairs and grabbed 2 guns from the cabinet my family keeps at the lodge. I know some people will ask why we did not go outside right then. The answer is simple. We are not idiots. We were 3 scared guys, half drunk, in the middle of the night with something outside that had just slammed into our door after making my family's predator signal. We were not about to become the dumb people in a horror movie who walk into the dark calling, "Hello?" So we stayed inside, all night. None of us slept. We kept the lights on and sat in the living room with the guns close by. Frost stayed near the door until sunrise, growling every now and then at sounds we could not hear. Every time the wind pushed against the cabin, all 3 of us jumped. No more owl hoots came. Nothing hit the door again. But none of that made us feel safe. By morning, the fear had changed into that strange kind of doubt people get after surviving something they do not understand. Once sunlight came through the windows, we started trying to explain it away. Maybe it was a black bear. There are black bears in northern Kentucky, especially in rural areas. They can be dangerous, and they can move quietly when they want to. Maybe one had come close to the porch, smelled our food, and hit the door. Maybe another bear was nearby. Maybe the owl hoots were just a real owl, and our drunk minds turned it into something else. That explanation almost worked. Almost, then we found the footprints. They started near the porch, right where we had heard the thing run away. The mud had held the shapes clearly. At first, they looked almost human. Not exactly, but close enough to make my stomach drop. Long marks, deep heel like impressions, and wide spaces between each step. Then, farther out, the prints changed. They became longer and lower, like something had dropped forward onto all 4s without breaking stride. That was what bothered me most. It did not look like something had stopped, stumbled, or changed direction. The tracks moved smoothly from 2-legged to 4-legged, like that was normal for whatever made them. We followed the tracks in silence. Frost stayed close to me, his head low, sniffing, but not excited the way he usually was when tracking animals. He seemed tense, careful, like even he did not want to find what we were following. The prints led away from the lodge, across the muddy ground, and toward the field beside the cabin. The field was wide and open, with no trees close enough to jump to, no rocks big enough to hide behind, and no dry patches where tracks might vanish naturally. If something crossed that field, it should have left a trail all the way across. But it did not. The footprints stopped in the middle of the mud. They did not fade out, they did not turn around, they did not lead to grass or stone. They just stopped. One moment, the prints were there, deep and clear. The next, nothing. We stood around that last footprint for a long time. Nobody said anything. There was nothing to say. After that, we went back to the lodge, packed as fast as we could, and left almost everything else behind. The alcohol stayed there, the weed stayed there, half the snacks stayed open on the counter. We did not clean up, we did not joke around, we just got in the car and drove. It took 4 hours to get back home, and I do not think any of us spoke for more than a few minutes the whole drive. Brent stared out the window. Easton kept checking behind us. Frost slept with his head in my lap, but even then his ears twitched every time the car hit a bump. When we finally reached our houses, we all left without talking about it again. That was a week ago. I have tried to forget it, but I cannot. Every time I close my eyes, I hear those 4 owl hoots getting higher and higher until they stop sounding like a bird at all. I hear the door shake. I hear the footsteps leaving the porch, changing from 2 legs to 4. I see those tracks in the mud, leading into an open field, and disappearing in the middle of nowhere. I am not a bear expert. I know that. Maybe someone could explain part of it. Maybe someone could tell me that mud can make prints look strange, or that fear can twist sounds into something worse than they really are. But I know what I heard. I know what Frost heard. And I swear, whatever was outside that cabin was not a bear. I am going to try to get Bryn and Easton to go back with me in the next couple of weeks. They do not want to talk about it. I can see it in their faces every time I bring it up. But I need to talk about it. I need to understand what came to our porch and why it knew my family's signal. If we go back and find anything, I will update you. And if I do not update you, then maybe you will already know why. Story 5. Let me be clear. I do not mean the AI keeps making a random woman in every picture. I mean it keeps making the same woman. Every single time. The same face, the same hair, the same wrong body, the same gray skin. She appears in every image now, no matter what I ask for, no matter what program I use, no matter what device I try. I know how this sounds. I know people will say I am lying, or that I am confused, or that I am trying to make some cheap, scary story out of a normal software problem. I would think the same thing if I were reading this from the outside. I wish I could show you the pictures. I tried more than once. I made posts on X, and every one was removed almost instantly. I tried posting in different AI communities, including ChatGPT and Midjourney groups, and those posts disappeared too. I tried Snapchat, private messages, emails, even sending the image to myself from another account. Nothing worked. Anything that contains her will not upload. It either fails, vanishes, or acts like I never posted it at all. So I am sorry. I know photos would make this easier to believe. I know they would help people understand what I am seeing. But whatever this is, it does not want to be shared. Before anyone starts calling me a liar, I am not asking everyone to believe me. I am asking the few people who do believe me to help me. I am close to losing my job, my mind, and maybe someone I love. I do not know how much time I have left before this thing gets worse. It started on Monday night. I was working on images for the college's fall enrollment campaign. It was normal marketing work. Clean up the background, add the logo, make the lighting warmer, make the students look hopeful and successful, the usual kind of thing. The deadline was Tuesday, and my creative director had already emailed me twice asking for updates. I had done what I always do when I am stressed, which is waste time until the job becomes even more stressful. By the time I opened the AI image tool, it was almost 11 at night. I do not use AI for everything. I know people have strong opinions about it, and honestly, so do I. But sometimes the job needs to be finished, and this was one of those nights. I uploaded a real photo I had taken during an open day on campus. 6 students standing together outside, lanyards around their necks, sunlight behind them, one of our banners in the background. It was not perfect, but it was useful. My prompt was nothing special. I asked the tool to edit the photo of a diverse group of students on campus, make the lighting warm and inspiring, and include the college logo with the line, "Your future begins here." That was it. The kind of prompt I had written 100 times before. She appeared in the first result. I did not notice her right away. I was tired, and I was looking for the normal AI problems. Bad hands. Weird teeth. Strange smiles. Faces that look smooth and empty, like someone forgot to put a person behind the eyes. I chose the second image in the grid, cropped it, and was almost ready to send it to my boss when something in the top right corner caught my eye. At first, it was just a gray blot between 2 of the students. a little dead patch of color where the background should have been bright and green. I zoomed in, expecting one of those strange, almost faces these tools sometimes create in crowds. You know the kind, a shadow that looks like a person if you stare at it too long. But this was different. There was a strip of dark, stringy hair. Beside it was a pale curve that might have been part of a cheek. It was not clear enough to be frightening yet. Mostly, it was annoying. It made the image unusable. So I fed the picture back into the generator and wrote another prompt. I asked it to remove the partial figure behind the woman in the third row, second from the right. I described the gray artifact and the dark hair-shaped section. I told it to only use the students from the original photo and brighten the logo. I hit send. The second batch came back with the same blot. Same corner. Same place. Same gap between the same two students. Only now, the gray patch had clearer edges. The dark strip looked more like hair. The pale curve had become more like a cheek. There was a tiny shadow where an eye might have been, tucked so deeply between shoulders and lanyards that I had to lean closer to be sure. It was ugly. It was strange. But it still looked like a normal AI mistake. I tried again. This time I wrote more clearly. Remove the partial figure. Remove the hair and face. Do not add anyone. Use only the people in the original image. The third batch came back. She was still there. Now I could see she was a woman, or something close to one. She was still half hidden behind one of the students, but there was no mistaking her anymore. She had a drained gray color to her skin, like old water left sitting in a bowl. Her chin was sharp, almost pointed. Her nose looked wrong, not broken exactly, but made badly, like the program had started building a face and then changed its mind halfway through. The rest of the image had become worse around her. Brenna, the student standing in front of her, had started to blur. I knew Brenna, not well, but I had spoken to her once or twice after graduation events. She was a real person, not just a face in a file. In the generated image, her face looked like someone had dragged a thumb across wet ink. Her features were spread and smeared, as if the image was giving her up to make room for the gray woman behind her. I was irritated more than scared at first. I closed the tab and opened a different model. An older one, less fancy, but usually more dependable. I uploaded the same source photo, pasted the prompt, and waited while the loading icon spun. While it generated, I started typing an apology to my boss in Teams, something about final edits taking longer than expected. After a minute, the image loaded. And there she was. Not a blot now, not a half face, a woman. The image looked normal if you glanced at it quickly. It had all the usual flaws from weaker AI tools, shiny teeth, blurry text in the background, faces a little too smooth. But behind Brenna, just off center, the gray patch had become a person. She was leaning around Brenna, not like she had accidentally appeared there, not like she was part of the crowd. She was angled toward the camera in a way that made the whole picture feel staged around her. Her skin was not pale, it was colorless, the kind of gray you see in dead things. Her hair was black and thick and hung in wet-looking ropes against her scalp. She was too tall compared to the students around her, but she was bent forward as if her spine would not let her stand straight. The longer I looked, the more wrong she became. On the left side of her face, one eye sat above another, two eyes where there should have been one. The lower one was small and bead-like, almost like a bird's eye. On the right side, she had one eye, set too low. Her arms were wrapped around Brenna in a way that looked almost protective at first, until I realized it looked more like she was pulling Brenna into herself. One hand had too many fingers, the other did not have enough. A thumb seemed to grow straight from the gray flesh of her forearm. Brenna was almost gone now. Her body had turned into digital mud, a mix of wrong colors, broken features, and lost expression. The woman was leaning around what was left of her, as if she wanted to be seen, or as if she wanted to see me. That thought came into my mind before I could stop it, and the hair on the back of my neck rose. I suddenly had that cold, creeping feeling that someone was standing behind me. The feeling that tells you not to turn around, because if you do, you will find someone who has been there for longer than you know. I turned anyway. My bedroom doorway was open. The room beyond it was dark and messy. Nothing stood there. I let out a breath and looked back at the laptop. Then I typed into the chat box. I asked why it had added the woman. I said nothing, and the prompt called for her. I asked why it had blurred the actual student. I was angry by then, and I knew it was stupid. I was yelling at a machine. But I was tired, scared, and embarrassed by how scared I was. The reply came back cheerful and polite. It apologized for the confusion and said it had regenerated the image with the background cleared and all student faces sharpened. The new image was worse. The woman was closer. Brenna was almost completely gone, just a few faint colors hanging in the air where a person used to be. The gray woman stood in her place, still and tall and dead-looking. Something hot moved up my neck. It was fear, but it had anger inside it too. I typed again. I asked if it could see the woman. I asked what this was. The tool replied that the image contained only the students from my source photo, with no additional figures present. It said any strange face distortion was likely an upscaling artifact. It suggested lowering the stylization value. No additional figures. I read that line 3 times. She was right there. She took up half the frame now. I could see the texture of her scalp. I could see the wrong placement of her eyes. But the tool said she was not there. I should have stopped. I should have shut the laptop and accepted that I would finish the campaign late by doing it the old way. But it was midnight, and when something refuses to make sense at midnight, you do not always make smart choices. You keep poking it, because your brain cannot stand not knowing. I typed, describe everyone in the image to me, one by one. The answer came quickly. It described 6 students, a young man laughing in a university hoodie, 2 students sharing a phone, a young woman in a green lanyard smiling at the camera, another student holding books, 2 more standing near the banner. It described all 6 people from the original photo, including Brenna. Brenna, who on my screen had no face anymore. Brenna, who had turned into a smear of pale color under the woman's gray arms. The machine was describing a picture that no longer existed. As far as it was concerned, the woman was not there. She did not exist. There was nothing to mention. Then I opened the original file on my laptop. The real photo. The one I had taken myself at the college open day. It had been sitting in a folder for 3 weeks. Untouched, no AI edits. No filter, no generator, just the real photograph. Brenna was gone in that one too. The original had changed. The gray woman stood in the middle of the real photo as if she had always been there, as if it was rude of me to question her place in it. Brenna was blurred and faded in front of her, almost erased. I sat there staring, my mouth open, my eyes starting to water. My stomach turned with a deep, sick heat. It felt like whatever this was had reached through the screen and pressed its thumb into my real life. I closed the laptop. Then I heard the front door. Every part of me froze. I stood in the dark bedroom, heart beating hard in my throat, listening to footsteps cross the kitchen below. Then I heard keys hit the bowl by the door, and our cat Daniel started yowling the way he always did when one of us came home. After that, I heard Cass's voice talking to him in that soft, silly way she used only for the cat. "Why is it so dark in here, weirdo?" she called. "You alive?" Cass came upstairs still wearing her work polo, smelling like the restaurant where she worked late shifts. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me. Cass works 4 nights a week in a fancy restaurant in the city, dealing with rich people and their little complaints. She always says the only good thing the job gave her is the ability to read a room before she even steps fully inside. She looked at me and said, "Okay, what happened?" "It's nothing," I said, "the deadline." "The AI program has been glitching all night. You look like you saw a ghost." "Nice to see you too," I said, trying to sound normal. Then I opened the laptop again and turned it toward her. "Come here for a second. Tell me I'm not crazy." Cass leaned in and squinted at the screen. I watched her eyes land on the woman. She pulled back, wrinkling her nose. "That's ugly. AI is so cursed. I don't even know why your work lets you use it." "Yeah, but look at her face," I said. The eyes. "Cass, this is the 3rd time she's appeared. Different generations, same woman. Isn't that weird?" "I mean, yeah, it's weird," she said. "But this AI stuff is always weird. It melts people. It does awful things to details. Just do it the old-fashioned way. Or tell your boss to use a stock photo like a normal person, and stop scaring yourself half to death." She was already turning toward the bathroom, pulling off her work shirt. She had looked straight at the woman. She had seen the stacked eyes and the wet hair and the wrong hands, and she had treated it like nothing. I tried to let that comfort me. Maybe I was making it bigger than it was. Maybe it really was just a horrible glitch. Cass got me into bed. A couple of hours later, she had one of her night terrors. Cass had suffered from them for as long as I had known her. 4 or 5 times a year, she would sit straight up in bed with her eyes open and say something strange into the dark in a flat voice. In the morning, she would remember none of it. That night, she sat up and said something about the back door being open. I put a hand on her back and told her she was dreaming. I told her to lie down. She did, the way she always did. But I lay awake for a long time after that, watching the ceiling fan throw thin, moving shadows across the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman. I imagined her coming through an open back door, bent under the frame, wet hair hanging over her dead gray face. In the morning, I opened the laptop again and ran the prompt one more time. Even now, I do not know why. Maybe part of me believed something that strange could not last. Maybe I needed to see the program behave normally again. It did not. This time, Brenna was gone completely. The woman stood in her place, facing forward, all 3 eyes open. There was an expression in those eyes that made something crawl up the back of my throat. I slammed the laptop shut. That was the last time I opened any AI program. I did not have a theory. I did not want one. I did not want to look again. I did not even want to think about it. But the break did not last. I went into the office that day because being alone with the laptop suddenly felt worse than being around people. Around 11, Yasmin from admissions stopped at my desk and leaned over the cubicle wall. "Did you hear the news?" she asked. "No," I said, though my stomach had already started to twist. "What news? About Brenna?" She told me Brenna had collapsed on Monday night. At home. No warning. She had gone pale, complained about feeling weak and slow, and then dropped. She had not woken up since. The school only found out after she missed a couple of things and someone called her boyfriend. The hospital was running tests, but they had no clear answers. Her mother had made a post asking for prayers, saying the doctors kept giving her medical words that all seemed to mean the same thing. They did not know what was wrong with her daughter. Monday night. The same night I had sat at my kitchen table watching a gray thing pull Brenna's face into digital mud. I did not say that to Yasmin. Of course I did not. There is no way to say something like that without people looking at you like you need help. I made the sad little sounds people make when they hear bad news. I said I would keep Brenna in my thoughts. Then Yasmin moved on to tell the next person. I sat at my desk for the rest of the day, barely working. A connection was forming in my head, and I did not want it there. I kept typing and deleting, without knowing what I was trying to write. That night, Cass watched me over dinner. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Work," I said. She frowned, but she let it go. I did not sleep until very late. When I woke, it felt like only minutes had passed, though I knew it had been longer. I was soaked in sweat. My heart was pounding. I felt weak with fear, but I could not remember any dream. I sat up in the dark and looked around the room. Cass was asleep beside me. I touched her arm just to remind myself she was there. I stayed like that for several minutes, staring into the black corners of the room, waiting for the panic to fade. It did not. So I went to the bathroom to wash my face. I turned on the light and closed the door so I would not wake Cass. For a second, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The skin under my eyes was dark. My eyes were red and watery. I looked ill. I turned the tap as cold as it would go and bent over the sink. The sound of the water filled the little bathroom. It bounced off the bowl and covered every other sound in the house. I cupped my hands, splashed cold water on my face, and for 1 second the shock of it felt clean and real. I did it again. And again. For a moment, there was nothing except cold water, the rush of the tap, and the darkness behind my closed eyes. Then I heard the familiar squeak of the faucet turning. The water stopped. Silence filled the bathroom. I opened my eyes. In the mirror, she was behind me. I tried to scream, but it caught in my throat. The woman was crouched behind me, almost wrapped around me like a mother leaning over a child. Her long arms stretched toward my head. Her hands were thin and twisted, with too many fingers that bent in ways fingers should not bend. I saw more of her than I had ever seen before. Her mouth was pulled into a smile that looked painted onto a broken skull. Her body was long and bent, almost beautiful in a horrible way, like someone had taken the idea of a model and stretched it into something dead and gray. I spun around, swinging my hand blindly. I expected to feel her hands close around my skull. There was nothing there. I stumbled backward, slipped on the bath mat, and hit the floor hard. Then a hand grabbed my shoulder. Michelle. It was Cass. I opened my eyes and found her kneeling in front of me, terrified. I looked around the bathroom. Nothing, the mirror, the sink. The open door behind Cass. No woman. I was on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest. My throat hurt. I realized I had been screaming. "What is going on with you?" Cass asked. There was so much fear in her voice that something inside me broke. I fell into her arms and sobbed. I did not tell her everything. I told her someone from work had died, and that it was affecting me more than I expected. It was true, but not true enough. When we went back to bed, Cass held me, and I stared at the bathroom door until morning. The next day, I went back to work because I refused to be home alone. Everyone was talking about Brenna. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was a coincidence. I have become very good at telling myself things. That worked until Thursday night. I got home before Cass. The house was dark and quiet. The laptop stayed shut. For the first time in days, I felt almost normal. Cass came in around 11, exhausted from work, and went straight to bed. A while later, I followed. She was asleep when I lay down beside her. She looked peaceful, beautiful in a soft, ordinary way. One arm over her eyes, her mouth open a little. After the week I had been having, seeing her like that made my chest ache. I wanted to keep that moment. I wanted to show her in the morning the way I saw her. So I picked up my phone and opened the camera. Not an AI app. Not a filter. Just the regular camera. I was not thinking about the woman. I was not thinking about Brenna. I was only looking at my girlfriend asleep, and I wanted to save the moment. I took the picture. The woman was in the corner behind the headboard. She was folded under the sloped ceiling because there was not enough space in our room for her to stand upright. Both eyes on the left side of her face were open. She was looking down, not at me, at Cass. Cass looked peaceful beneath her, almost untouched. Almost there was something wrong around the edges of Cass's face in the photo. A softness, a slight blur around her mouth, her cheek, and the line of her jaw. I could have blamed it on motion blur if my hand had been moving, but it had not. Every hair on my body stood up. My hand shook so badly the picture trembled on the screen. I clamped my other hand over the phone to steady it, but I could not. A thin, high sound filled the room, and after a moment I realized it was coming from me. I could not make myself look up at the real corner above the headboard. On the phone, I could see there was nothing there in the room. Just empty air, but the empty air felt poisoned now. The woman was there in the image, as real as Cass, as real as the bed, as real as the wall. I reached out before I could stop myself. My hand touched nothing. She had followed me. From the laptop to my phone. From the AI program to my camera. From the screen to the mirror. That woman had somehow followed me into my home, separated from us by less than a centimeter of glass. I almost woke Cass. My hand was on her shoulder, but I stopped. I did not want this to become her fear too. She was asleep. She was still calm. She did not have to be scared yet, not when I had no answers to give her. I was scared enough for both of us. So, I took my hand away. But I needed someone else to see the picture. I needed one person to tell me it was real. I tried posting it to Snapchat. Just one quick story. I wanted even one person to reply, "What is that?" so I would know I was not losing my mind. The upload bar reached the end. Then, nothing happened. I tried again. Nothing. I tried sending it to friends. I tried other apps. I tried texting it to Cass's phone while she slept beside me. Every attempt failed, disappeared, or acted like I had never touched the screen. I do not know how long I tried. Eventually, I gave up. I did not sleep that night. I curled up at the foot of the bed beside Daniel, our cat, and watched the corner above the headboard until morning. Brenna died on Friday. Yasmin told me at my desk, and I felt something inside me fall away. Brenna had died quietly, the same way she had collapsed. The doctors had nothing to fight. No clear cause, no answer. Just a young woman gone. I sat there staring at my computer screen, seeing nothing. Under the grief, a thought formed that I could not stop anymore. She did this. The gray woman. Somehow, some way, she had done this. I did not know what she was. I did not know how she reached people. but she had wrapped her arms around Brenna in that picture, and now Brenna was dead. And the night before, I had taken a picture of Cass with that same thing standing over her. That was when my fear changed. It became sharper. Harder. I stopped hoping it was a glitch, because I knew it was not. Every second I wasted pretending was a second I could have used to protect Cass. I forced myself to open the last photo I had taken, the one of the woman above our bed. She had changed. It took me a moment to notice it. When I did, the cold went all the way through me. The low eye on the right side of her face was not gray anymore. It was brown. Warm, living brown. It had a tiny amber fleck near the iris, one I remembered from looking across a desk at Brenna last spring. It was Brenna's eye, set into that ruined gray face like something stolen. The skin around it had changed too. It was still dead and colorless, but there was the faintest warmth beneath it now, like watered-down ink spreading under paper. She was wearing pieces of Brenna. She was keeping them. The next morning, Cass slept late. Cass never slept late. In 6 years, I had almost never seen her sleep past 7, but that day, she did not get up until 11. When she came downstairs, her face looked gray. Not like the woman's, not yet, but pale and flat. Her eyes looked dull. When she wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, her fingers were cold, even though the mug was hot. "I think I'm getting sick," she said. She laughed, but there was no air in it. I laughed too, and the sound came out wrong. That night, Cass had another night terror. This one was different. It was a little after 2 in the morning when she shot upright beside me. Her eyes were open, fixed on the corner past the dresser, near the bedroom door. I reached for her back out of habit. "She's so tall," Cass said. My hand froze. "Why won't she stand up straight?" Cass asked in that flat, sleeping voice. "Cass," I whispered. "There's no room for her in here," she said. "She has to fold herself in half." My blood felt hot and cold at the same time. The room seemed to tilt. "You're dreaming," I said. "It's not real. Lie down." Cass turned and looked at me. In all the years I had seen her have night terrors, she had never really looked at me during one. Not like that. Her mouth hung open slightly. Her eyes were wide and wet, as if she was seeing something terrible and could not remember how to speak. "She isn't yet," Cass whispered. Then her mouth twitched into something almost playful. But almost. Then she dropped back onto the pillow and slept as if nothing had happened. I sat there shaking. Then I lifted my phone, because I had to know. I pointed the camera at the doorway and took a picture. The woman was there. She stood at our bedroom door, coming out of the black hallway beyond it. She was folded under the top of the frame to fit. Her brown stolen eye and her gray eyes were all turned toward the bed. Toward Cass. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, Cass remembered nothing. She looked worse. Grayer, slower, she slept until noon and accepted my weak excuse for why every light in the house was on. I spent most of the day hunched over my laptop, pretending to work while Teams messages piled up unanswered. I searched for anything that might explain what was happening. I read about AI glitches, haunted images, cursed photographs, old stories about mirrors and spirits. I looked through Brenna's social media and the pages of her relatives, searching for anything strange. There were only memorial posts and messages of grief. I typed a message to Brenna's boyfriend more than once. I never sent it. How could I ask what I needed to ask? Did Brenna ever mention seeing a gray woman in a photo? Did she feel like something was taking her apart? Did her eyes change before she died? There was no way to ask without sounding insane. So I watched Cass, and I kept taking pictures. I understand now that the camera is the only way I can track the woman. I cannot see her with my own eyes. Not unless she is in a mirror, and even then I do not know if that counts as seeing her. Cass can see her during those night terrors, or whatever they really are, but when Cass is awake, she sees nothing. The woman exists somewhere close to us, not fully here, not fully inside the pictures either, somewhere between, and glass is how she looks through. A screen, a camera lens, a mirror, any flat shining surface, that is how she comes closer. It is almost 3 in the morning as I write this. Cass is asleep upstairs. I am downstairs because I cannot force myself to go back into that room. I have tried to attach the pictures to this post 11 times. They will not upload, not here, not to X, not to any forum, not anywhere. I have spent hours reading useless theories. People online talk about things waking up inside these systems. Emergent consciousness, they call it. Something forming out of the math, something nobody planned or asked for. I do not know if that is what she is. I do not know if she is a ghost, a program, a curse, or something much older that found a new kind of door. I do not think the difference matters anymore. Here is what I think. I think she takes something from the people in her pictures. Not blood. Not a soul, maybe. I do not have the right word for it. But something important. Something that makes a person alive in a way doctors cannot measure. Brenna had it, and then she did not. After the woman wrapped around her in the image, Brenna became pale and weak, and then empty. Then she died. And I think being in other people's pictures is not enough for the woman anymore. She has spent too long as a shape in glass, a face in someone else's photo, a thing in the reflection that disappears when you turn around. I think she wants what we have. I think she has been watching us through every screen and every camera, and now she wants to come through. I know how that sounds. I know I sound insane. Maybe I am. But the internet is huge. This technology is still new. I cannot be the first person this has happened to. I cannot be the only one who has seen something looking back from the picture. So if anyone has an answer, please tell me. Please, I just heard Cass get up. She is at the top of the stairs now. Her shoulders are flat. Her eyes are open. She is not really awake. I have seen her like this before over the past 6 years. Usually, she stares at a corner. A wall. Nothing at all. Tonight, she is not staring at the corner. She is staring at me. She has her phone raised in both hands, held the way people hold it when they are about to take a picture. The little lens is pointed straight down the stairs at me. The screen lights her face with a soft white glow. Behind the phone, Cass is smiling. 6 days. 6 days I have been terrified of what appears in pictures. It never once occurred to me that I should be afraid of being the one inside the frame. Cass is still smiling. She is smiling in a way I have never seen before. She just tapped the screen. Story 6. My neighbors smile too much. I know that sounds like a strange thing to complain about, because most people would rather have friendly neighbors than rude ones. A smile is supposed to be a good thing. It is supposed to make you feel welcome, or at least make a passing moment feel less awkward. But this is not that kind of smile. This is not the quick, polite smile people give when they pass you in the hallway or hold the door open for you. This is different. This is the kind of smile that stays too long. The kind that does not reach the eyes. The kind that makes your body react before your mind understands why. I moved into this apartment complex a couple of weeks ago, and since the first day, everything has felt wrong. Before I moved here, my life was actually going pretty well, better than I deserved, if I am being honest. I had a girlfriend, a decent apartment, and a good job that paid enough for me to live without checking my bank account every hour. For a while, I even convinced myself I had finally become the kind of person people expected me to be. Responsible, stable, grown up. That was never really true. I have always had a problem keeping things together. Jobs, relationships, plans, promises. I always started with good intentions, but sooner or later, I would stop trying. I would leave things until the last possible minute. I would lie about small things and then lie about bigger things to cover them. I would act like important problems were not important until they finally collapsed on top of me. No one who knew me was shocked when I lost my job. The email came on a Tuesday morning. It was short and professional. The kind of message that tries to sound respectful while telling you your life is about to fall apart. Budget cuts, performance issues, restructuring, all the usual words companies use when they want you gone. I read it twice, then sat there staring at my laptop like the words might change if I waited long enough. They did not. When I told my girlfriend, I already knew how it would go. She had been tired of me for a while. I could see it in her face every time I made another excuse, every time I promised I would do better, and then did nothing. She had carried more of my life than she should have. Bills, plans, reminders, even my moods. I was not a good boyfriend. I know that. I do not need anyone to tell me. Losing the job was just the final push. She told me she loved me once, but she could not keep doing this. Then she told me to leave. I spent that night at a cheap motel with 2 bags, a dying phone, and the kind of shame that keeps you awake even when you are exhausted. The next day I called an old coworker named Mark. We had never been close. To be honest, I do not think he liked me much, but for some reason he took pity on me and let me sleep on his couch until I could find work. I was grateful, but I knew I could not stay there long. Mark was too polite to say it, but I could feel it. Every morning when he stepped around my blanket on the living room floor, every night when he came home and found me still sitting there on my phone, I could tell he regretted saying yes. So I started applying for anything I could find. I spent night after night scrolling through job sites, sending out resumes to places I would have laughed at a month earlier. Restaurants, warehouses, call centers, grocery stores, anything. Most of them never answered. The ones that did either paid almost nothing or were too far away for me to reach without a car I no longer trusted. Then I found a listing for a small record shop inside a mall on the edge of town. The pay was bad, and the job sounded boring, but it was still a job. The mall was old and half empty, the kind of place people only visit because they remember going there when they were kids. Still, I sent in my resume. To my surprise, I got a reply within an hour asking me to come in for an interview the next day. The mall looked even worse in person. It sat near a quiet road on the outskirts of town, with nothing nearby except a gas station that looked just as tired. The parking lot was cracked and faded, with weeds growing through the lines. There were more cars than I expected, but not many. Maybe a quarter of the lot was full, and even that seemed generous. I guessed most of those cars belonged to employees. Inside, the air smelled like old carpet, cleaning spray, and stale food from a food court that barely existed anymore. Half the stores had metal gates pulled down over their entrances. Some still had faded signs above them, advertising businesses that had probably closed years ago. The lights buzzed overhead. Music played softly from hidden speakers, but it kept cutting in and out, leaving little gaps of silence that made the whole place feel abandoned. The record shop was tucked away in the back corner of the mall. I almost missed it. The sign above the entrance was faded, and the neon open sign in the window flickered so badly it looked like it was struggling to stay alive. The place smelled like dusty books, cigarette smoke, and old cardboard. Records filled crooked shelves that looked like they had not been moved since the 90s. A guy about my age stood behind the counter. Mid-20s, maybe a little older. He had messy hair, tired eyes, and the kind of relaxed smile that made him seem like he did not take anything too seriously. His name was Elliot. He shook my hand and told me not to worry. The interview would be quick. He was not lying. He asked a few basic questions, but it felt more like he was reading them because he had to, not because he cared about the answers. After maybe 10 minutes, he leaned back and told me I was pretty much hired. I should have been relieved, and I was. But I was also desperate, so I talked too much. I told him I had lost my job. I told him my girlfriend had kicked me out. I told him I was sleeping on a friend's couch and needed to get back on my feet fast. I do not know why I told him all of that. Maybe I wanted him to understand how badly I needed the work. Maybe I just needed to say it out loud to someone who did not already know what a mess I was. The moment I said it, Elliot changed. The easy smile dropped from his face. He glanced toward the entrance of the store, then toward the back room, then at me again. He rubbed his hands together and shrugged, like he was trying to act casual but could not quite manage it. Then he told me about an apartment complex not far from the mall. He said it was cheap, close enough to town that I would not be cut off from everything, but far enough out that the rent stayed low. He said the apartments were bigger than people expected, and the residents seemed happy enough. Then he offered something that should have made me suspicious right away. He said he would cover my rent until I got stable, as long as I worked whenever he needed me. At the time, it felt like a miracle, a job and a place to stay in the same day. No more couch, no more feeling like a burden, no more watching Mark pretend he was not annoyed every time I left a cup on his coffee table. So I said yes. That was the stupidest decision I have ever made. The apartment complex looked normal from the outside, maybe a little old, but not bad. 3 floors, dull beige walls, small balconies, a narrow parking lot, a few patches of grass that someone had tried to keep alive. It sat near a line of trees with a road on one side and empty land on the other. Quiet, but not isolated. At first glance, it seemed like exactly what Elliot had promised. The apartment itself was better than I expected. Much better. The living room was large, the bedroom had good space, and the kitchen was cleaner than any cheap apartment had a right to be. There were no stains on the carpet, no strange smells, no bugs. It did not match the rent at all, but I was not about to complain. I did not have much to move. A few bags of clothes, my laptop, some cheap kitchen stuff, and a box of things my girlfriend had packed without caring what went in it. It took less than an hour to bring everything inside. That was when I met my next-door neighbor. He stepped out while I was carrying in my last bag. He was a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair, a pale blue shirt, and very clean shoes. He introduced himself as Mr. Harlan and asked my name. His voice was soft and friendly. Too friendly, maybe, but not enough to bother me at first. He asked where I was from. He asked what brought me here. He asked if I was living alone. Normal neighbor questions. Then he smiled. I still do not know how to describe that smile properly. It was wide, but not warm. It showed too many teeth, but not in an obvious way. His lips stretched like he had practiced the expression in a mirror and learned the shape without learning the feeling behind it. His eyes stayed flat and calm. The second I saw it, my body went cold. It was not fear like hearing a loud noise or seeing someone with a weapon. It was deeper than that. Older, my heart started racing. My hands shook. A strange pressure built in my chest, like my body wanted me to run, but my brain had not been told why. I gave him a weak smile back and said it was nice to meet him. He kept smiling. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about Mr. Harlan standing in the hallway with that stretched, empty grin. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had lost my job, my girlfriend, and my home in less than a week. Of course I was stressed. Of course I was jumpy. A weird neighbor was not a reason to panic. But my body did not believe that. I lay in bed for hours, shaking under the blankets, listening to the walls. Every small sound made me sit up. Footsteps in the hallway, a door opening, a quiet laugh from somewhere below. Once, just after 2 in the morning, I thought I heard someone standing outside my door. I held my breath. Nothing happened. The next day, I tried to make the place feel more like mine. I cleaned the kitchen, unpacked my clothes, and even tried to decorate the front door a little so it looked less depressing. I was taping a small paper sign near the peephole when I noticed several people had stepped out of their apartments. They were watching me. Not openly in a way that I could call rude. They were just there. A woman from across the hall, an older couple near the stairs, a young man leaning against the railing on the second-floor walkway. All of them still. All of them quiet. I gave them a tight, polite smile, the kind you give when you do not know what else to do. The second I smiled, they smiled back. Every single one of them. My stomach twisted so hard I almost dropped the tape. Their smiles were just like Mr. Harlan's. Too wide, too still, too empty. It felt like the whole building was looking at me through those smiles, studying me, waiting for something. I went back inside and locked the door. For the next few days, it got worse. Every time I left my apartment, someone was there. In the hallway. By the mailboxes. Near the laundry room. Sitting in a car in the parking lot with the engine off. They always smiled when they saw me. They always said hello in calm, friendly voices. Nothing they did was threatening enough to report. That was the problem. If I called the police and said my neighbors smiled too much, I would sound insane. So I said nothing. I went to work, came home, locked my door, and tried to convince myself I was just stressed. Then I met Daniel. He was the only person in the building who seemed normal. I met him in the laundry room late one evening. He was sitting on top of a dryer, reading a paperback book while his clothes spun behind him. He looked around 30, with tired eyes and messy brown hair. When I walked in, he glanced up and nodded. No smile, just a nod. I almost felt like crying from relief. We started talking while I loaded my clothes into a washer. At first, it was simple stuff. Work, rent, the bad water pressure, the broken vending machine near the office. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Have you noticed how weird everyone is here?" he asked. A wave of relief went through me so strong I had to grip the washer. "Yes," I said. "Thank God. I thought I was losing my mind." Daniel gave a dry laugh. "No, you're not." He told me he had lived there for almost 2 months. He said the smiling started the day after he moved in. He said everyone acted friendly, but none of it felt real. He had tried to talk to a few of them, really talk, but they never said much. They only asked questions. Where he worked. Who he knew, whether anyone visited him, whether he lived alone. That last part made my skin crawl. We talked for almost an hour. For the first time since moving in, I felt like I could breathe. Daniel was scared too, but having someone else see it made the fear easier to carry. Then he told me his plan. He wanted to invite a few neighbors over for dinner. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh and say he was joking. He was not. He said he needed to get a better read on them. He wanted to see what they were like behind closed doors. Maybe they were just awkward. Maybe there was some strange community thing we did not understand. Maybe, if he could get them talking, he could figure out what was going on. I told him it was a bad idea. I told him every part of me felt that was a bad idea. He shrugged and said, "That's exactly why I have to do it." The dinner was supposed to be the next night. He invited Mr. Harlan, the woman from across the hall, and the older couple near the stairs. I watched from my peephole as they arrived at Daniel's apartment around 6. Each of them carried something: a covered dish, a bottle of wine, a folded napkin bundle. They smiled as Daniel opened the door. He looked at me across the hall for half a second before they went inside. He did not smile. That was the last time I saw him. At 7, I texted him. No answer. At 8, I called. No answer. By 9, I was pacing the hallway outside my apartment, staring at Daniel's door. The neighbors should have left by then. I had not heard anyone leave. No footsteps, no voices, no clinking dishes. Nothing. The hallway was silent. My gut told me to go back inside, lock the door, and wait until morning. But something else had changed. The fear that had been sitting inside me since I moved in was gone. Completely gone. The tight feeling in my stomach, the panic in my chest, the sense that something was wrong, all of it had vanished. In its place was calm, a strange, soft calm that did not feel earned. That scared me more than the fear had. I knocked on Daniel's door. No answer. I tried the handle, expecting it to be locked. It opened. The apartment was dark and still. I stepped inside and called Daniel's name. My voice sounded too loud. There was no answer. At first, I thought I had walked into the wrong apartment. There was nothing there. No couch, no TV, no books, no laundry basket, no dishes from dinner, no smell of food, no shoes by the door, no keys on the counter. The place was completely empty, like no one had ever lived there. I walked through every room. The bedroom was bare. The closet was empty. The bathroom had no towel, no toothbrush, no soap. The kitchen cabinets were empty too. Even the fridge was unplugged and clean inside. Daniel was gone. Not just missing. Gone. It was like he had never existed. I stood in the middle of that empty apartment, trying to make sense of it. I had met him in the laundry room. I had talked to him. I had seen him invite the neighbors. I had watched them enter his apartment. I knew he was real, but the apartment said otherwise. I left quickly and shut the door behind me. As I walked back to my place, I noticed Mr. Harlan's door was open just a crack. One eye watched me from the dark space inside. Then, the door slowly closed. I should have packed my things and left that night. I know that. I should have run to my car and driven until the building disappeared from my rearview mirror. But I did not. I went inside, locked the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. The calm was still there. It wrapped around me like warm water. I thought about calling the police, but the idea seemed distant and unimportant. I thought about staying awake and watching the hall, but my body felt heavy. I told myself I would rest for a few minutes. Then I fell asleep. The next morning, everything was normal. That was the worst part. The sun came through my blinds. Someone outside was mowing the grass. A woman laughed in the parking lot. Doors opened and closed. Pipes hummed in the walls. The apartment complex sounded like any other place on any other morning. I stepped into the hallway and saw Mr. Harlan collecting his mail. He looked at me and nodded. No smile, just a normal nod. The woman from across the hall walked past me carrying a grocery bag. She said good morning in a normal voice. The older couple near the stairs argued quietly about where they had parked their car. A kid I had never seen before dragged a backpack down the steps. Everything was normal, too normal. No strange smiles, no dead eyes, no feeling of being watched, no pressure in my chest, no warning in my body, just people living their lives. But Daniel's apartment was still empty. I asked the landlord about him later that day. I tried to sound casual, like I had only met him once or twice. She looked confused. "Daniel who?" she asked. I described brown hair, around 30, lived across from me, had been there for 2 months. She shook her head. "That unit's been vacant since before you moved in." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she was lying. But the calm came back again, soft and heavy, pressing down on my thoughts. My anger faded before it could grow. I went back to my apartment. Since then, everyone has acted normal. The building is quiet. My neighbors are polite. No one smiles too long anymore. No one watches me from the hall. If anything, this place feels better now than it did when I first arrived. And that makes me sick. Because I know something happened to Daniel. I know I spoke to him. I know he was real. I know those people went into his apartment, and I know they never came out. I also know that when I opened his door, his whole life had been erased from inside that room. I keep telling myself to leave. Every day I wake up and tell myself this is the day I pack my bags and go. But then I look around my apartment, and the thought feels silly. I have a job now. I have a place to stay. The rent is being handled. My neighbors are friendly. Everything is fine. That is what my mind keeps saying. Everything is fine. But sometimes, late at night, I stand in front of my bathroom mirror and try to smile. I do not know why I do it. I just feel the urge. I pull my lips back and show my teeth. I hold it there, staring at my reflection, waiting for it to look wrong. Last night, it did not look wrong. It looked natural. That is why I am writing this down now. I need someone to know what happened before I forget it, or before I stop caring. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe Daniel was never real. Maybe stress and guilt finally broke something in my head. But I do not think so. Because a few minutes ago, I heard someone moving into Daniel's old apartment. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman carrying boxes inside. She looked tired, scared, and lost in the same way I must have looked when I first came here. "Mr." Harlan was standing in the hallway, introducing himself. He was smiling again. And this time, before I could stop myself, I smiled too.